Spotlight.
This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Israel-Iran conflict and evolving situation in West Asia. The participants are Professor Aswini Kumar Mohapatra, expert on international affairs, and Niharika Bhuwania, anchor.
The world's eyes today are on the conflict between Iran and Israel, and it's time we had a detailed conversation on the subject and understood the global political and economic implications of it. Good evening and welcome to Spotlight. You're with me, Niharika, and tonight we put the spotlight on the Iran-Israel conflict. We have with us Professor Aswini Kumar Mohapatra from the School of International Studies, JNU. Good evening, Professor Aswini, and thank you so much for joining us on Spotlight this evening.
Thank you.
So, Professor Aswini, the conflict between Iran and Israel, it's got the world's eyes on it. However, the roots of it go back a long, long time. So, briefly, do you want to tell us where the roots of today's conflict lie?
Roots of conflict lie in the very complex characteristic of the region called West Asia. And I don't want to become historical about the conflict formation in the region, but the region is quite complex. You see, most of the states located in this region happens to be artificially created state with the borders drawn by the European powers at the end of the World War II. And the result is most of the states are not internally cohesive and united. As a result is you'll often find the intrastate conflicts, in other words, conflict within the state, which have recurred at least for the last 30 years, whether it is Syria, Iraq, Libya, any country for that matter. But fortunately, Iran happens to be one of the few natural states of the region, like, for example, Egypt. So you have a territorially defined a civilization like Iran, which was called Persia before until 1935, when it was named as Iran. Now, on the other hand, you have Israel, which the state which emerged quite late, 1948, and with the Jews coming across the world to build up the state called the State of Jews. Hence, they are called the settler state. So the problem here is this state was established at the cost of the people who are living. That's what they claim, the Palestinians before. So the main problem in the region is the Palestinian issue. And second, as I mentioned, because of the very artificial nature of the state, the region remains conflict prone. And third is that because of the internal instability and the interference of the external power, like United States of America since the World War II, and before that, Great Britain and France, the result is the interference from outside has complicated this whole system, and a system which is multipolar by nature. Unlike South Asia, for example, India, Pakistan, you have too many, regional powers competing for supremacy. So these are three major factors which account for the perennial conflict proneness of West Asia. And whatever we're witnessing today is nothing but a manifestation of those characteristics, or in other words, the culmination of the several conflicts within the region, ultimately coming to represent a conflict between two major powers like Iran and Israel, and trying to establish their supremacy in the region, whereas Israel is getting support of the United States of America, which is though a power from outside, but very much an inside power, quote unquote, because it's the country which has established a kind of Pax America, which is more than 10 military establishments across the region. So it is very much a part of West Asia, even if though happens to be outside power. So this Americans' continuous support to Israel on the one side, and the resistance coming from the local power like Iran, before that Syria, and before that Iraq, and which are called as the revisionist state. Result is there is a kind of conflict between countries trying to establish, the local powers trying to establish their influence in the region, and which has been challenged by the external power. Thus again, the conflict today between Iran and Israel is a partly manifestation of that character or the nature of conflict as well. So the third point here, I would basically like to mention here, that all this internal conflict, external interference, and third, the issue of Palestine together has rendered this region quite conflict-prone all through.
Basically, one cannot really look at the present conflict in isolation. One has to take into account the multiple layers and the shades of grey that exist in the entire region. Before we go on any further, let's listen to what our Akashvani Dubai correspondent has to say about recent developments in the region.
The ongoing conflict is sending shockwaves through West Asia's energy sector. In Qatar, emergency meetings are underway with major energy firms after Israeli strikes targeted South Pars and North Dome gas field, which is the largest non-natural gas reserves in the world, jointly shared by Iran and Qatar. Industry insiders say that the attack has triggered serious alarm over regional energy security as global oil markets brace for any further disruption to Gulf supplies. The strikes have placed Qatar in a delicate position, that of navigating its close strategic alliance with the United States while safeguarding its critical economic ties with Iran. International reaction remains measured. The United States has bolstered its military presence in the region, calling it a precautionary move. A third U.S. Navy destroyer has entered the eastern Mediterranean, while the USS Nimitz carrier strike group is en route to the Arabian Sea. Russia, meanwhile, has issued a stern warning. The Kremlin has said that it would respond very negatively if Israel, with US support, were to target Iran's supreme leader. Meanwhile, in Iran, mass protests continue. Thousands have gathered in Tehran and other cities, voicing anger against Israel and carrying images of Iranian commanders killed since the fighting has begun. This is Vinod Kumar for Akashvani News from Dubai.
How are the Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia, like UAE, navigating this heightened tension? Would this be an opportunity to weaken Iran, or are they more concerned about regional instability and the potential for spillover?
See, the dilemma for the Gulf countries is on the one hand, they are opposed to Iranian, what they call the hegemonic ambition in the region, and because strategic and partly ideological, because here you have a revolutionary regime, 1979, the Islamic regime, in a country which happens to be a Shia country, and the majority of the Gulf countries happens to be Sunni countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. Now, for this country, the basic problem is the security, because these are the countries which do not have any internal political accountability. These are the countries which are ruled by the ruling families, okay? And the families actually have survived so far because of the external support coming from across, particularly the United States of America, especially in 1991, when each Gulf country signed a separate treaty with America, which promised to ensure their survival and security. Now, the problem for them is, on the one hand, they're opposed to Iranian expansion, what Iran called its so-called forward defense, the way Iran had of late until 1924 December, when it tried to establish influence through its proxies and agents, whether it's Lebanon or Syria, or for the matter in Gaza, or even for the matter Yemen, showed they were opposed to that kind of influence. At the same time, they are very wary of the spillover effect of any kind of the prolonged conflict between America and Israel on the one hand and Iran on the other, because these countries ultimately are likely to bear the brunt of any prolonged bloody conflict between Iran on the one side and these two countries on the other. So their dilemma is how to navigate between the two. I hypothesize that could be one of the reasons why President Trump decided to give the negotiated settlement a chance once again, coming under the pressure from the countries located in the vicinity of Iran. Ultimately, these are the countries that are affected by any conflict which is likely to be quite destructive, likely to be prolonged or protracted. So they are not in a position today at a time when they have undertaken sweeping economic reforms to face this kind of security threat because of the continuation of war in any form.
Now, United States has been a crucial ally for Israel, and their direct involvement is going to redefine the roles and redefine everything for these three countries involved, if at all, right? And also, Israel might want to depend on the United States for the GBU-57, which it may need to fulfill its nuclear mission, if I can put it in those terms. How difficult will it be for Israel to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities without this bomb? And of course, how does direct US involvement redefine its role in West Asia?
I doubt even if Israel ultimately lays its hands on those bombs, the bunker buster, how effective it would be ultimately, given the fact that the nuclear establishment, the key nuclear establishment in Iran is underground, okay? And a lot of things are coming about their location, extremely difficult. And second, its implications around that area have been beyond. And third, the retaliation from Iran. Because if you have been observing the developments for the last couple of days, Ayatollah Khamenei has been directly threatening America that it would immediately retaliate by attacking its bases in the region. Anything can happen. So thereby, basically, it involves thereby the risk of widening the war, okay, beyond Iran as a threat. This is what I mentioned. This is the enduring source of concern for the Gulf countries.
Since we spoke about escalation of the conflict, I think it's imperative that I talk about the Strait of Hormuz here, which is a critical choke point for global oil and gas supply. Now, if the conflict goes on, there is likely to be a huge impact on global trade if this artery is blocked, right? Global energy prices and supply chains could be disrupted. Could you briefly talk to us about this point as well?
Yeah, this is a key choke point, you say, and it is under the control of Iran. There's a possibility, that's what some strategists have sounded already the alarm, the Iranian trying to block that, or maybe try to mine the ships and the oil tankers. Either way, you see, as I mentioned before, so about 17 million barrels of oil, you see, they pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and that was 6 million tons of LNG also passed across this strait every month. So think about that, that is about 1/3 of world total production of oil that passed through this particular area. Now, if should Iran decide to impose that kind of things, okay, some kind of blockage on the oil tankers and the passage of the ships in that area, there's a possibility that you'll have a certain hike in the prices, the oil price across the world. This is going to affect the global economy, not simply Indian economy in general, because of sudden hike in the oil prices and its implications, economic implications across the world. That's a possibility. I'm not denying it. Therefore, Strait of Hormuz definitely assumes significance, both strategic significance as well as economic importance. And that could be the ultimate Brahmastra in the hands of the Iranian leadership.
As a nation with strong ties to both Israel and Iran, I would like to talk about India and the delicate situation that India finds itself in, right? So India has to play a balancing act in this matter, and it has to keep its strategic interests, including defense cooperation with Israel and energy or connectivity projects with the Chabahar port with Iran in mind, right? Whenever giving a reaction or whenever supporting either side. So how do you see India positioned in this conflict, and what is the best way out for India?
Extremely delicate, you see, for India, because we have had a long-standing relation with Iran, cultural, historical, diplomatic relation with Iran. Prime Minister Modi visited in 2016, signed this agreement of the Chabahar port. The 10-year agreement of the Chabahar port is quite strategically important for us, from particularly Indian security perspective. But the problem here is we have a country like Israel, which also stood by us in the latest, the Operation Sindoor, also openly, very overtly supported India. So extremely difficult for India to take a position other than basically concentrating its diplomatic efforts for negotiated settlement if possible, exerting collective diplomatic pressure on America, particularly President Trump, not to involve United States of America, military or otherwise, in a conflict, in a confrontation with a wider implications globally, regionally, and the negotiation has chance every likelihood. Today, honestly, I sounded optimistic about a kind of a positive outcome of the negotiation in case it is resumed. And there's a possibility the Iranian side is likely to climb down from their rigid position. And maybe there's a possibility I see grant certain concession, what the Israelis and Americans have been demanding, a return for the progressive lifting of the sanction. Now, the sanction in the last 50 years turned out to be crippling economically for the Iranians. So they want the sanction to be withdrawn gradually, and both sides hopefully will try to re-establish peace and stability in the region collectively with American support.
Very well, Professor Aswini. Thank you so much for joining us on Spotlight and leading us to a greater understanding of this conflict. It was lovely being in conversation with you tonight on Spotlight.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Israel-Iran conflict and evolving situation in West Asia. The participants were Professor Aswini Kumar Mohapatra, expert on international affairs, and Niharika Bhuwania, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani.
Spotlight.